Millionaire pretends to be paralyzed to test the woman he loves. Malik Hart had everything a man could want: fortune, influence, and a fiancée he believed was his forever. But when he staged a car accident and rolled back into his penthouse in a wheelchair, the mask on Sloane's perfect face slipped. The woman who once kissed his cheek for the cameras now sighed at his requests, splashed water over his hands in irritation, and leaned close to whisper with his business partner about a scheme that went far beyond betrayal. Malik stayed silent, watching, letting their cruelty show itself. What Sloane and Carter didn't know was that Malik wasn't broken at all, and the day he stood up would turn their picture-perfect wedding into a reckoning everyone would remember. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing you stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The morning of the engagement brunch smelled of polished wood and strong espresso. Malik Hart, quiet billionaire, sleeves rolled to the elbow. His watch turned inward, moved through his penthouse like a visitor. He straightened a cufflink, exhaled slowly, and looked out at the skyline painted in pale light. Sloane Whitmore drifted in behind him, silk dress brushing the floor, perfume crisp and expensive. She smiled, not at him but at the room, at her reflection in the windows. The warning signs were small at first. A server reached to refill her champagne. Sloane tipped the glass without a glance, then wiped the rim with a napkin, as though touching it herself was cleaner. When a florist apologized for a late delivery, her jaw tensed before she murmured, "Fix it," in that smooth anchor's voice that wrapped sharpness in velvet. Malik felt something tighten in his chest. He'd fallen for her polish, the easy laughter, the ambition that matched his own stride. But off-camera she drifted. She scrolled through her phone in elevators while the concierge greeted her by name. She never remembered the driver's kid's birthday. Glamorous plans were always we, but chores near the espresso machine were you. At the cafe downstairs, two baristas whispered behind the hiss of steaming milk. "She's gorgeous," one said, sliding a cup across. "But the vibe?" "Yeah," the other replied softly. "He seems decent. Hope he figures it out." Their words weren't harsh, only tired, like people who'd learned to read weather before the storm. Malik tried to give grace. Everyone had bad days, but patterns once seen don't unstack. He noticed the pressure of her hand on his back as she guided him toward a photographer, gentle but steering. He noticed how she corrected an assistant's tray placement by nudging it 2 inches, then smiled as if she'd saved the day. Even her footsteps left a hush behind, like air waiting for instructions. "Babe, chin up," she'd teased once, lifting his face with a polished nail. "You look exhausted." He'd laughed, the way men like him were taught to swallow unease and keep the room pleasant. But a quiet thought had started knocking. If the money disappeared, if my body failed, would she still be here or only stay dressed for the part? By the balcony, a cool breeze brushed his skin. Sloane stood nearby, practicing a warmer smile in the glass than the one she'd just given him. Malik wasn't angry. He was measuring. Wealth had taught him many lessons, but the oldest was this: love that needs a stage isn't love, it's PR. "Downstairs," the doorman murmured to a porter. "She's stunning, sure, but kindness?" The porter shrugged, hefting a crate. "Looks fade, habits don't." Their voices drifted up through the lobby hum, an accidental chorus Malik hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore. He drew in a steady breath. He had built empires by testing things under strain. Contracts, teams, even machines. You don't trust a bridge because it looks beautiful. You trust it after you've driven weight across it and felt it hold. As laughter and crystal clinks swirled around him, Malik began to shape a plan, careful, deliberate, one cool heartbeat at a time. If love was true, it would stand when the ground shifted. If love wasn't real, the fall would reveal it. Malik lifted his glass, smiled for the flashing cameras, and let everyone believe in the fairy tale. Inside, he was already sketching a quieter kind of test. No fireworks, no grand declarations, just steady pressure, the kind that shows where cracks hide. It started with a whisper he wasn't meant to hear. Late one evening, After another round of tastings and fittings, the house had finally emptied. Warm air still clung to the chandeliers. Malik wandered down a side corridor, jacket unbuttoned, searching for silence. Voices slipped through a half-open study door. Sloane's tone came first, smooth but clipped. "It's almost done. He's too distracted to see it. Marriage, then divorce. The settlement makes everything mine." A man's low laugh answered, familiar, weighted with history. "Carter Hale." Malik froze, fingers tightening on the frame. Carter, the partner who once signed contracts with him in tiny offices, who'd stood as best man at another friend's wedding, leaning in close to his fiancée. "You'll be set for life," Carter murmured. "The prenup?" "He won't dare enforce it with the press watching." Sloane's reply was colder than polished stone. "He'll be paralyzed by shame, if nothing else. And when I'm finished, we'll own every inch of him." Malik backed away, silent though his pulse slammed against his ribs. Rage clawed up his throat, but discipline forced it down. He had built empires by reading markets, knowing when to move, when to wait. This would be no different. Later in the kitchen, Rosa the maid hesitated with a tray of empty flutes. Her eyes carried a secret she didn't want to speak. "Sir," she began. Malik lifted a hand gently. "I heard." Relief softened her shoulders. She dipped her head, returned to wiping counters as though nothing had passed between them. By morning, rumors drifted through the staff like smoke. In the pantry, "She's after his money." "Think he knows?" "Near the garage. Boss trusts too easy. Watch, she'll show her true face." No one dared tell him outright, but their glances spoke volumes. They pitied him. Malik moved as if blind, though inside he logged every detail. Carter's sudden nearness, Sloane's sharper tongue with his team, the champagne toast, where she leaned toward Carter a moment too long. Carter's grin when he said, "You're a lucky man," never reaching his eyes. That night Malik stood before the mirror, jacket loose, gaze heavy. Betrayal wasn't an explosion. It was a slow leak that drowned a room. He braced against the counter and whispered, "If I want the truth, let's see how far it runs." The plan took shape, not revenge, but revelation. He would build a stage, not for their lies, but for their choices. Pressure would do the rest, the way glass gives way with a single tap. At dawn, his voice was even when he told his driver to ease up near the estate gates, letting a whisper of an accident slip into the world. His assistant blinked, then nodded. Malik offered no explanation. A strategist doesn't announce an experiment. He sets it in motion and waits for results. Soon, news spread. A car crash, a fracture pressing against his spine. Malik let the story breathe on its own, carried by hushed concern. By the time he returned home in a wheelchair, every detail was in place, and no one dared question it. Those first days were a study in contrasts. His staff hovered with quiet devotion. Fresh soups, steady arms lifting him over thresholds, kindness that asked for nothing. Sloane, though, revealed herself almost at once. She said the right words, but her eyes flickered with impatience. One evening when he asked for water, she sighed as if he'd demanded gold. "Again," she muttered, dropping the glass onto the table so hard it rang like a warning. Malik watched quietly, eyes unreadable. He didn't want her smiles rehearsed for the cameras. He wanted to see who she really was when the world wasn't looking. Each day, her disguise crumbled a little more. She walked ahead, leaving doors half closed so he had to wrestle with them. During a garden lunch, she parked his chair in full sun, forgetting him until sweat slid down his collar. The first time she rolled her eyes at his request, Rosa's hands paused over a tray. The maid's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Then Malik pushed the next piece of his test. A discreet rumor planted through a banker friend. Stocks frozen, accounts under review. The story floated back into his home like fog creeping under a door. That night he watched Sloane scroll through her phone, jaw stiff. "So," she said flatly, "how bad is it?" He gave her a weary smile. "Let's just say, things aren't as steady as they were." Her quiet said more than any question could. She didn't ask about his health. She didn't reach for his hand. She stared at the ceiling, eyes cold, as if charting an escape route. Soon her cruelty sharpened, a careless splash of icy water over his lap. A hissed insult when she thought no one was near. "Worthless," he heard once, spat like venom. Malik stayed silent, pulse steady, betrayal raw beneath his calm. Others noticed. Near the pantry, two cooks whispered, "She doesn't even hide it anymore. Boss deserves better," the other sighed. "If he doesn't see, he's blind." They didn't know he stood just beyond the corner, hearing every word. Their pity weighed heavier than the chair beneath him. Then Carter returned. Malik feigned sleep on the terrace as Carter leaned close to Sloane, voices slipping through the night. "He's just a shell now," Carter murmured. "Exactly," Sloane replied, brushing hair from her cheek. "Soon I'll be free of this charade." "And you'll be there with me?" Malik's stomach clenched. Anger pounded against his ribs, but he forced his breathing slow, eyes closed. "Let them believe I'm weak. Let them hand me every blade they don't know they're sharpening." That night, alone in the shadowed study, he rolled to the mirror. The man staring back looked worn, older but unshaken. He whispered, low and fierce, "Keep going. They'll show everyone who they are." The test deepened. He wouldn't stop halfway. He would follow this to the edge, until their hunger reached for something darker than insults or neglect, because only then could truth become undeniable. Their malice no longer hid behind polite smiles. It walked the halls like it owned them. Meals arrived late, lukewarm, as though he were an afterthought. Doors were left just wide enough to snag his wheels. A jacket was tossed into his lap without a word. Malik told himself to wait. Each slight was a stroke on the portrait of Sloane's soul. Then came the storm. Rain lashed the windows, thunder rolling like a warning drum. Malik sat in the lounge, a book open but unread, when a sharp tang pricked his nose, the bitter scent of chemicals in his glass. He set it down without comment, heart hammering. Across the room, Sloane's eyes flicked, quick and calculating. He didn't drink. Not that night. 2 days later, Rosa found him in the kitchen, face pale, voice trembling. "Sir, I think they're planning something worse. I saw Mr. Hale in the pantry with a vial, and Sloane told the chef he'd never recover." Her hands twisted in her apron. "I can't stay quiet anymore." Malik laid a steady hand over hers. "You've done enough, Rosa. Leave the rest to me." His tone was calm, but inside, fury pressed against restraint like a storm trapped behind a dam. Whispers spread among the staff, dark as smoke. At the garden gate, "She's killing him slow and Carter's in on it." By the laundry, "Boss looks thinner. If he dies, she wins." Their pity cut deeper than any of Sloane's words. Malik gathered every word, every whisper, storing them like stones for a reckoning. That night, lying still beneath the covers, he let his breathing settle into a rhythm of feigned sleep. At the door, Sloane's phone cast a pale glow across her face. "It won't be long," she murmured to Carter on the line. "He's weak, helpless. Once the wedding's over, everything will be ours." A soft laugh crackled through the receiver, cruel, certain. Malik's jaw ached from holding it shut. He wanted to rise, to shatter the lie, but he reminded himself silence hits hardest when it finally breaks. He would wait, steady, until their sins towered high enough that no shadow could hide them. Morning brought another test. Sloane spilled water across his shirt, scolding, "Look at you, pitiful." Her tone was acid. Carter lingered nearby, smirk curling at the edge of his mouth, like a man savoring a secret victory. Malik's face stayed calm, though his pulse drummed against his ribs. He had tested markets, tested men, tested empires. Now he had tested love, and what he'd found was rot. The stage was almost ready. The wedding waited, a storm coiling just beyond the horizon. Malik would let them lay their last card on that altar, and then he'd reveal the truth before every watching eye. The church gleamed, dressed in ivory roses and gold-edged aisles, a picture-perfect fairy tale. Guests whispered as Malik was wheeled in, suit immaculate, expression composed. To them he was the courageous groom, battered but determined to wed his devoted fiancée. To him it was the final act of a carefully written play. Sloane drifted down the aisle, silk gown trailing like triumph. Carter stood with the groomsman, smirk faint but sure. They believed the crown already theirs. The vows began, solemn words filling the hushed room. Malik held Sloane's gaze as the officiant asked, "Do you promise to love him in sickness and in health?" Her pause stretched a breath too long. Her smile quivered, thin and practiced. "I do," she whispered, not with devotion but with calculation. Malik lifted a hand, stopping the ceremony. A ripple of confusion stirred among the guests. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed against the arms of the chair. First his hands, then his legs, strong, unwavering. Gasps rolled through the sanctuary like thunder. Sloane's face blanched. Carter stiffened, smirk gone. Malik's voice rang clear. "For months, I let you show me who you really are. I heard the plans, the insults, the poison. You mistook patience for weakness. Today, it's a mirror. Uniformed officers stepped from the side doors, files in hand, Rosa's statement, recordings, vials marked as evidence. The congregation parted as Carter's wrists were bound, then Sloane's. Her veil slid to the floor as she fought to keep her mask. Guests murmured, scandal snapping through the pews. Malik stood tall, no chair beneath him, no weakness left to fake. "Wealth can buy a stage," he said, voice steady, "but only character can fill it. Love doesn't spit on frailty. It stands beside it when everything else falls." As Sloane and Carter were led out, silence hung heavy, broken only by a rustle of disbelief. Malik glanced to the back where Rosa stood, eyes bright, head bowed in quiet relief. The fairy tale had shattered, but truth had spoken louder than vows. In the end, Malik proved that real love isn't built on riches, but on loyalty, especially when the world thinks you're at your weakest. If this story made you rethink trust and betrayal, hit subscribe so you never miss a twist. And share it with someone who needs the reminder. Stories like these aren't just entertainment, they're lessons written in courage.